Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. This time, we are talking about, as you know from the title, monotheistic deity design. And then next time, we're going to talk about polytheistic deity design. We figured we would start off January, since we haven't started our theming for our months yet. That will be in... You guys will have already heard about that if you had watched our end-of-year update, which came out July 1st. December 31st, July 1st, kind of New Year's, whatever. It's a New Year's update.
January?
So, yeah. So, it came out then, and we're releasing these in January. So, there you go.
Perfect.
Monotheistic deity design is this time, but before we do that, let's go ahead and get into announcements. As far as things going on, I haven't actually recorded the announcement thing yet, so I will let that kind of be the main thing for announcements if you want to know what's going on right at the moment. For larger announcements, for announcements right now, you will have heard, if you watch that, again, that we are going to be theming our content. That won't start till March, and that will be beginning with March of the Mechs. So if you want to know some theming and some fun stuff about using mechs in your games, then you can keep tuned in for that. We will record them. We record these 1 month early, so that will give Avenue Studio time to collaborate and get an idea of what they want to do that next month. So that cushion time allows for Jacob and Dan to get their stuff worked around for their end on what they think they want to do, and so we'll be collaborating with those, and you guys will have that content come out, and it will work out well. So that is the idea, and that is the main thing we have for our announcements right now, aside from what was in the announcements in the main announcement video. So that's what I have. What do you got, Dan?
Pretty close to the same thing. Avenue Studios, Dan Stacy. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, anywhere podcasts are found. We, of course, live stream Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. And so for the themed month collaboration, on our Wednesdays, every other Wednesday, we do a Pathfinder 2nd edition. Right now, we're doing Outlaws of Alkenstar. That's coming close to the climactic finale, so I'm very excited for that. And then we'll transition into something else in Pathfinder 2nd edition. But on the off Wednesdays, that's when we're going to do the theme months. And I'm really excited. Jacob and I are planning to do Forest Forge 1 week, where we build the one-shot in Foundry, so you can watch us do that live, and then we'll play it the 2 weeks after that. And we're planning to have those one-shot modules available for sale in the Forge, and maybe in PDF as well, or the PDFs might come out later. So what we're hoping to do is, by the time, like March of the Mechs, we'll have that, and then in April, you'll be able to find that for purchase, or if you become a patron or a local subscriber, of course, you'll get access to everything. But that's one of the things I'm really excited about doing this, doing the theoretical and creative on Around the Hearth, and then getting in the nitty-gritty Forest Forge, and then seeing how it plays, and then hopefully having it available for everyone who wants to try that out in Foundry. And yeah, that's about it.
All right. Cool beans. Well, that means...
Oh, you know what? There's one other thing before I shut up, because I have these. I haven't done it Around the Hearth. We finally got these. I'm just really proud of them.
They look nice.
So they're pretty awesome. Owl Creek Design, I think, on Etsy. They do some really great stuff. Anyways, that's available for our patron and local subscribers at a certain tier, with a lot of other merch. But I'm really happy with that. Kristen designed it and everything, so I'm proud of my wife.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
The
the logo came out nice and crisp, so
it really did. It's an iron-on sort of thing onto it, so I'm really happy with the detail that came out, and it's smooth. And I love these. I love the foldable dice trays.
They are so nice.
They're really handy, and they flatten.
Transportable.
So yep. It's just great.
It also makes it so you don't have like a when you roll dice on a wooden table or
Yes.
with glass.
Oh, that's the worst.
Well,
Metal dice not allowed.
Ugh. I specifically have things with the noises really getting to me and making it so I do not want to socialize anymore. So, like, having things that dull the extra noises of dice really helps keep game night nice.
Mm.
I got spoiled by learning to play on a pool table.
Oh,
Oh.
fair enough. That's it.
There you
It
go.
was real nice, and then I went other places and there was all the loud click-clack of pain.
Plebs.
Well, I mean, I guess you can't. It's one of those things you can't do the meme off of that you see around the webs. You know, clickety clackety, I roll to attackety. So
Yeah. The plastic dice against themselves, completely fine. Metal dice against itself, a little rough, but like heavy dice hitting a loud table, I'm okay. No, thank you.
yeah, you're
I'm
right.
okay.
You're right, though. Glass is kind of the worst defender on it.
Yeah,
That.
for sure.
All right. So now that we know we want to give Levi a glass dice tray at some point,
Oh,
Yes.
we will.
you know what? I would hang it up somewhere.
There you
It
go.
would be pretty. It's where you'll keep all the dice
Oh,
so that they don't move.
I'd love that though. It'd say Levi's pies. It'd be custom.
Oh
There you
yeah,
go.
it'd go real. Go like Swartzky's glass works or whatever it is to do it.
Mm,
Getting real
Oh,
fancy for
yeah.
it.
that'd be good.
All right, this is
Only
not
the
doing.
best.
Speaking
Okay.
of Levi, this is not him doing his shout out. Which shout out are we going for this time, Levi?
This shout out will be for the Nerd Game Company Action Fiction. They started off mostly with their Monsters of Merca line, which is a parody US, I would say more from a lefty perspective parody, just as useful knowledge on that. Lots of fun jokes, lots of really good art. They are currently working on Goblin Cave and Cthulhu Dreamt.
Mm-hmm.
So Goblin Cave is like a 2-team board game where one side is the adventurers, one side is the goblins. The goblins want to protect their stuff, the adventurers want to come in and get it. Similar, but different mechanics on both sides, and you deck it out to either steal or keep your stuff.
Gotcha.
And they've got different boards. Like, they're working on a ship board that every turn moves you, like, to the left or right.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. Still playtesting that one out for sure. A lot of the other boards they're more certain on.
Gotcha.
Cthulhu Dreamt, they do not have it out released yet either, but there's a lot of... So, like, they have a specific musician who's releasing related themed music. They have cryptography puzzles that are related to it coming out right now. A good portion of us in the Discord are kind of stuck on what to do with the current ones.
Fair enough.
And because I know the person, I have actually read through some of the base system that this is going to be built on.
Oh.
Yeah,
Nice.
because he's a roommate of mine.
Hey.
Oh, there you go.
So,
The Cthulhu art is pretty dope.
yeah,
Like,
they,
that looks amazing.
they spend a lot of their budget on artists.
Art is
Yeah.
expensive.
Like,
Yep.
the main people of the thing, like, are funneling money into this company as opposed to making money from it. Which, like, there's one part that you wish it'd make more, but, like, they keep on throwing more money into quality. But,
Yeah, I would definitely try the Cthulhu game for sure.
yeah,
That's sweet.
I mean, they really
Yeah,
make
and I do
Cthulhu
recommend the
look
board
pretty
game.
buff.
Yeah.
so it's based off of a system called Sojourn, which is, like, as denoted, about the journey as opposed to the destination, and a lot of it is having resources in all of your stats that you've got to budget throughout the day to achieve challenges and survive. So it's very much so a non-overpowered react. It's not like a D&D 5e fights Cthulhu-esque beast. It's more in the vein of Call of Cthulhu, where you're trying to survive the Eldritch.
Yeah. Cool beans.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now that was a real long shout out with a real long preamble.
Yeah. All right.
But we don't get kicked out for time anymore.
No. So we'll save the other one you mentioned for next time then.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So that means we're done with our shout out. We're done with our announcements. Travelers, come in. Sit down by the fire. Warm yourselves around the hearth as we discuss deities and making them and consume our preferred beverages.
Skull.
Skull. All right. So, I didn't ask before. Do either one of you want to start, or you guys want me to start?
I would like to start on the next one, because I have like a spiel that has been working in my head since we had discussed wanting to do the topic, whereas I do not have a similar starting point for this.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you go ahead, Adam, because the first thing that's popped in my mind here might be a cool transition to kind of end this.
Okay.
Unless who knows where the conversation goes, but...
Yeah. All right. So I will start us off with monotheistic deity design. This one is... Monotheistic deity design is not something that you actually see a lot in tabletop games or things like that. And I think there's good reason for that, which I'll talk about in a second. The idea with monotheistic deity design, and really any deity design, any kind of pantheon you want to work on or anything like that, is that you have to decide if you're going to have cosmic truth or not in your universe, for one thing. That's a good thing to know, because if there is one deity, that doesn't mean there's just one person claiming there's one deity. You can still have other religions. And so you have to work around that idea if you want to do that, depending on how wide and how big of a scope you want to go with your particular game. On the other side of that, you don't want to necessarily eschew all the other influences that you could use. So there's several examples of monotheistic beliefs in the real world. You've got the obvious ones of Christianity and Judaism and Islam, and I've heard arguments made for Hinduism, perhaps.
Probably a very specific variant of. You're going to want to go with Zoroastrianism for
right.
I don't think that's a particularly common one anymore. I'm not sure. Used to be more common.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think.
Well,
I know that there was an Egyptian pharaoh who was promoting a monotheism.
Right. He was doing something like the pharaoh was still related to God, but he was like conduit for God, or a
right. But he was also saying that there was only one of the gods that other people believed in, and that the rest of the pantheon was non-existent.
I'm not sure if he meant non-existent or just subservient to. And
that's fair.
That is a distinction to be made. So this actually is a good transition point. So things like Zoroastrianism, other things like that, those are good. We may circle back around to that. As well as the idea of a tribal society. A lot of tribal societies have the belief in a monotheistic viewpoint of the universe. But to bounce off of what Levi brought up, what the exchange here brought up, having a monotheistic deity design for your universe does not mean that you have to have no other spiritual influences in your universe. So, this would function a lot like how Catholics have saints that they'll pray to and be the patron saint of this or the patron saint of that. Or they have, depending on what you go with in Judaism, not Judaism, but Middle Eastern mysticism with like the Kabbalah and stuff like that, where there's this whole expansive books of folklore for angels and demons and what to draw from. Like the Shin Megami Tensei series draws heavily from those particular influences, so you can look there for not just designs but for the personification ideas. Those are useful because in the monotheistic idea, there is one God. There is one supreme being, I should say. And you can still have aspects below that. I'll use my world, my universe here as an example. There is one deity. There is only one true omnipotent being in the universe. But the way I have it worked, because I play in Open Legend so much, is that each of the attributes have their own divine spark, is what I called it in the 9 Guilds campaign, and then each of those in the Broken Universe campaign, and then those divine sparks that represent primal forces in the universe, like might or like alteration or etc., have a divine anchor, which is a mortal who mantles that, who takes that on, who embodies that power, and they become effectively deific. They can grant abilities to other people and stuff like that, but they are not themselves a god. They are not omnipotent.
They're like popes. Not in the, but in that sense of like how the Pope is supposed to be viewed, in that they are like the human closest to God. But in this case, like 10 of them. Kind of. Close to God in a very specific way.
Kind of
right. Saints is kind of what it sounds like to me, too.
Yeah, except a more limited set of patron saints in your specific case.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is a way to have many spiritual, I don't know if even spiritual influences is the right term because of the way it works in mine, but in your games, you could have many spiritual influences while there still being one god. And you kind of have to do that if you want to do a game where you're going to have a church of this or a cleric of that. So
yeah. And then we can get into animism with that as having both a monotheistic being and other influences being like, so it's definitely not anywhere near a god, but like this river has thought. It has desires. So like there is some other force that is on like a very local level, and deity would be very much so the wrong word for it.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's another place where it's like, yeah, I know all the way up there's that god, but this river keeps me alive.
That could also work with potentially a Gaia, like, or a Mother Earth. Like, Mother Earth is the being, but then there's different natural aspects contain something. You know, water does this. Then you could get almost into like an Avatar sort of, you know, bending sort of thing, depending on which element you focus in, but it's all underneath.
Yeah,
you know, Mother Earth.
It's funny because Avatar is not actually bad to draw on for a monotheistic ideal, because it follows very much the idea of Darma, where there is the cosmic universe and all creation and everything is a part of everything and all of that, and that to reach nirvana, or in the Avatar's case, to reach his avatar state, he has to shed away the cares of the world and fully embrace the Dharma, or well, as close to the Dharma as he could get without losing a physical body. And so that's only for Avatar The Last Airbender, though. If you go into Korra, they change the lore, and the spiritualism doesn't work anymore. So don't use that one for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're sticking with original IPs here.
Although, you know, I should say that, like, if you can get your brain and separate from the exact things you were hoping for out of it and kind of be like, yeah, it's a related IP, but think of it as, like, a spin-off.
That's fair.
Like, don't think of it as a canon. It's still a fun show.
I mean, the fight scenes look pretty cool.
Well, and, like, I think there's, like, interesting narrative beats.
It does have a really solid emotional hit with the boat scene between the two brothers.
Yeah.
That was pretty. That was good. I don't like the show, but that moment there was really good.
So,
yes, brother, it'll all be okay. It'll all be over soon. Oh, that was good.
You're gonna start me ranting though. They kind of ruined that moment.
Okay.
The rest of it, but
yeah. Hey, but
it is a great moment. There's some great moments.
Yeah. Okay. Now I should say that there is a sense in which we can consider Darma in that sort of view as kind of it's definitely not polytheistic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also very different from what most people think of when they hear monotheistic.
That is true. It's
right.
I would argue it still is. Like, I'm not saying you're arguing against it, but it is arguable that it still is monotheistic to say that there's Dharma in that sense.
We could quibble about exact language.
Yeah.
I think it's close enough that I will accept it for the terms of this chat.
Yeah.
Right? Well, because, like, if I wanted to get into nitpicky, I would prefer to define it as used differently just because of how monotheism is generally used to mean. I think it is not helpful from, like, I like studying religion in general, so I think from that perspective it is useful to split them for comprehension of both concepts, or have some third term that kind of links them both in. But for this discussion, it's like there is one largest divinity, you might say, but in a case where in a lot of things that one largest divinity is a separate entity, right? Like, they exist here. They have influence over everything, but they are not themselves everything. Where Dharma is that, like, all things are made up of the one thing.
Right. And there is a misunderstanding about monotheism used colloquially versus monotheism used as a simple definition. And so we're kind of using it as a definition of there is one God. There's one supreme God. That's kind of how we're trying to use it today, which is why Darma
in many
falls
ways, like, calling it a god has a very different. Part of this is, I think, linguistic equivocation. Like, God in these senses are very different words and meanings and concepts.
Perhaps. Well, okay,
this
is real world.
I think it's close enough for this.
We're supposed to be saying fictional stuff. Okay, real world inspirations are good. So
they are.
Play with them in your game.
This comes up into part of why I didn't want to start this conversation, is I wasn't sure what all aspects you wanted to cover and how you wanted to talk about this in specifics. I think in a, like, D&D setting, you can't have your monotheistic god too interactive because they are too powerful.
Right. And it goes back to the idea of needing saints. Or angels, or demons, some kind of messenger.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of thoughts.
Okay.
I'll start at the beginning, though, and just throw it out and see it.
That's usually the best place to begin.
If you don't know where to start, go back to the beginning. Comment if you know that movie. It's also a play. I'll start. If I don't get to all my thoughts, that's fine. The first thing we're talking about, I also love for an inspiration influence. The author Garth Nix, he wrote a short story, and I was trying to look it up while we were talking, but I can't remember what it is. It looks like he's actually made a full novel in the same setting where there's angel magic, so people can summon and bind an angel to them for powers. And I love the short story. I apologize, I can't remember the name.
Is it something like Immortals or something like that?
The new-ish book that I haven't read yet is called Angel Mage. But I cannot. I listen to audiobook anthology of a bunch of his short stories. He does a ton. But anyways, I love that one too because it's set in like a fictional history. So there's like some things that he pulls from medieval Europe, but they're actually the priests and stuff can bind an angel to them, and that's where they get their powers. So that's another one where similar vein. But I thought it was cool because they're like forcefully binding angels to them for powers, so it like is a toll on your physical body, and you have to become so powerful to get to the higher, like the archangels and stuff.
Are you talking about Sabriel? Or...
No, not the Old World series, which is another cool magic system.
Okay.
Old Kingdom. Is that the Old Kingdom series?
I don't know.
This was like a short story, but check out Angel Mage too. I haven't read that one yet, but it looks like it's in the same setting. But it's that same idea because it's using a faux Catholic faith backdrop. So there's one god, but everyone's magic comes from binding an angel to them, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it has a lot of interesting implications.
Yeah, and that's the same vein, like different magical abilities could be because you're binding to different angels.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can bring in demons for dark magic and all that stuff. Supernatural, the TV show, is another one. Like, the theology's terrible. It would make a great magic system.
It's a lot of fun to... I could imagine it being a lot of fun to play in and a lot of fun to mess around in, but that universe would be wow.
Yeah, it would.
I actually think it does fit, like, for the, like, random, hey, here's how these things work. Oh, you met this person again. Yeah. That really has an on-the-fly GM feel.
Yes.
Yes, you're so right.
Actually, and if, like, you were playing in that, even if some of the narrative was wonky, you'd probably be like, overall, hey, that was a pretty good campaign.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It wasn't fully tied in by the end, but, when you've personally been playing over the course of, like, years, you don't remember exactly how you started.
Right. Well, y'all don't. I usually do. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't work. Wait, what's going on? What's going on?
Well, my point is, like, if you binge the show, it's really easy to see all of the issues.
Oh,
but if you really space it out,
that is
you'd
fair.
be able to glaze over a lot of it.
Yeah, if you were doing, like, a once-a-month game type of thing, it'd be real easy to space it out. It wouldn't be that hard. And it wouldn't really
and then,
matter.
Like, the weirdness of how, like, what you're doing now doesn't coincide with what happened 6 months ago. You're just like, GM forgot a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, man, whatever.
Last season was this, and then now the greatest threat is this. And it's like, what? Okay.
And then the GM's like, sorry guys, we're having so much fun in this, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't want to end this game.
Personal opinion, watch the first 5 seasons, and then don't watch the end portion of the last, like, shot of the other, of the rest of the 5th season, and then you're good. It just works out. Well, it's so good.
You say headcanon, but, like, I think they were actually thought they were ending at 5 seasons, but they were so successful that they were forced to zombify their own show.
Yeah. If I remember right, like, interviews say that they were contracted up to 5 seasons, and then
that sounds right.
They renewed it because it was very popular, and so it just kept going and going and going.
So, this is not just headcanon. This is like the producers probably agree with you.
Yeah.
Oh, you had a well-written game.
Yes.
You got to the end. Your players were like, "Oh my god, that was amazing! Please, please, can we run more?" And you're like,
Yeah.
I used my narrative juice in this. That took me like a year to write. Yeah. I haven't been writing this whole time. I thought it was done.
Shout out to the actors, though. They were set for years, and they seemed like they were having a great time.
Well, I mean, after that, it was just fun all the time as far as what was happening in the story and everything.
Yeah.
What were you... I guess it kind of ended out like, what do you want to do? Well, let's do this. Because they did end up having actors direct episodes and do different things like that.
Yeah, why not?
And it really worked out.
It totally is a campaign. It's like every once in a while a player steps up
Someone
to the
has to GM. Yeah. That's
a good one too.
Yeah, it is a solid reference point for using, because there is technically one god in that setting.
Yeah.
There's so much else happening.
Right. Very limited overarching deity. Or at least passive at best.
Yeah.
Passive is, it's definitely
very much wound the clock and let it run, and there's all these kind of magics, and you don't really get into like, why are there werewolves and all this stuff? It's like,
They're just here.
They're here.
Because
Did you have fun?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the way that they end up wrapping up that deity as a whole, like God, that's just what they call him, God as a whole, he kind of is just, his answer would be, because it made for a good story.
Yeah.
That would be his answer.
And it got a little yin-yangy at the end, too. Dark and light. It's just dark and light. There's balance. So it would actually, it would make a great monotheistic campaign setting. Which actually kind of blends in something that I've had that people can totally steal for this one, the story I write on the side for fun. That maybe someday will come out, but totally steal it. Part of it is the overarching creation of the world is this dance. Is explained as these two like powerful forces that are forever trapped in a dance, and everything that happens is through that dance, and you can almost predict it. And so that could be another thing. They're impersonal. It's more like chaos and order that are in this forever dance.
Right. Like they are a performance, and you are a byproduct of that.
Yeah. And so then you can have the different magics and stuff, and you can have this overarching deity that people could pray to, but it's kind of an impersonal thing. Their dance is set. You can get into that weird thing where the dance is already set, and we are just walking out the steps, and we're just the echoes of their footfalls or something like that. And
so if you don't want it to be as much predetermined. So everything's obviously predetermined on the largest scale, right? But that doesn't mean that there can't be, like, I don't know, like, if you imagine it being a huge clockwork room, and, like, having some people being able to, like, hook in or de-hook gears towards the fringes, you can't change anything that's happening in the center, or any of the power that's driving anything, but you can kind of link in and link out for other smaller things. Depending on how... If you would prefer it to be like a fully predestined world, but it's just predestined on such a scale that no one can truly see or understand or know it, so like it's still narratively interesting, because just because the future's set in stone doesn't mean you know what that is, and you've got to deal with it no matter what it is.
I love the idea of characters, of playing a character that manipulates causality in a kind of way like you're talking about. Like, click in, click out. You can't stop the clock, but you can see the clock moving type of thing. And so you position yourself in certain ways, or like you're talking about, in and out, click in, click off, different gears on the things that you can control, and then that manipulates causality as a character concept.
Also, are there dance mages? Please tell me there are actual dance battles.
There are now.
Right? But, like, imagine...
That would be so cool. Absolutely.
As opposed to... I'm imagining, like, combat ballet. Well, because, like, ballet is supposed to be, like, a storytelling... I'm not saying that, like, I have any clue what a lot of the stuff is supposed to mean when I look at it, but then you hear people talk about it, and it's like, oh, it had all this meaning. Well, in this case, you see the meaning when they do their, like, tippy-toe dance that sends ice spikes up at your feet.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's kind of bending, in a sense, In
a sense, yeah.
It becomes a lot like the katas from the bending. So instead of martial arts, it's dance. Because they kind of did that joke again, that jab against Zuko and Aang when they did the fire thing, the fire kata.
Yeah.
I was like, so you're dancing. It's not dance. It's kata.
Hey,
So.
well, I've actually seen a fun video essay discussing why, like, fight movies got so popular is that they are, in effect, dance movies that dudes don't feel weird watching.
I can understand the sentiment. I don't technically agree, but I can understand the sentiment.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's one of those just making you think about it. It's not a strictly, this is exactly true, but it has that same satisfying, fluid, constant, interesting motion on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it fills a similar desire.
Right.
But one of the things is that I think part of the difference to my mind is that there'd have to be more of like a spell-esque choreography to it, because there's such a like precise set aspect to the dance of your world that I don't know if it would be as much bending, where like each new motion does something, as much as like if you want a specific effect, you have to know your specific dance.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
But anyway,
material components. That's cool. But that is the way. That's the way to do a monotheistic.
Well, I might even call that close to monotheistic. That sounds like a duotheistic.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
A dichotomy.
Though there is a point that like a duotheism is much closer in feel to a monotheism than a like polytheism.
Well, if you real world definitions, if you go through monotheistic and you look at it like a Catholic and you try to describe it that way, Catholics believe that there's this huge, as best I can tell, the devil and like there's this constant war between the two, and this can be a distinction you can make in your settings. Okay, if there is a constant war between good and evil, then you have these two forces, and it is very tempting to make it a dichotomy where they are equal in power, where there is this equal push. But it is much closer to what Tolkien did with Eru Ilúvatar than what a lot of other Catholic styles, like different flavors, like to go with. And it depends on what you want to do with your game. If you want a deity that is all-powerful, like you want the monotheistic, but you also want the battle between good and evil, that's where you have the messengers, the angels, and the demons. And that's who fights the battle. And the Eru Ilúvatar made everything. Like, he started...
Right.
He made everything, and then he had his creation of the Maiar make their music. And it was through the discord of one of them that all this others, the greatest of them, that this evil came in. The discord and the lack of harmony between the notes, and the pushing of one's own selfish aspects into it. And that's where the discord came from. So no one is pretending, Melkor didn't pretend like he could be Eru Ilúvatar. He knew inherently that the only thing he was going to get was Arda, or the created universe. That's the only thing he could go out and do and mess with. And in the same way, it's kind of like devil and stuff, devil and other things like angels. These Maiar are of equal power, or equal standing, we might say. Not necessarily power level, but standing. And they are who fight for the fates in the First Age type of thing of Middle Earth. In your settings, if you want to have that great supreme being as your monotheistic, you can, and still have that battle fighting and playing out, because the song continues despite Melkor's discord in it. The song still continues, and multiple times in the Silmarillion, Eru Ilúvatar states to Melkor, nothing you've done is outside of my design of the grander, greater music. And the same thing's true for Sauron and all the evil it's caused. But for the universe to exist, it has to exist with, in this case, free will might be the word you would use. So you have this whole, there's a lot to think about if you want to put the thought into it for your settings and the ideas of monotheism in your deific designs.
Right. I think part of my point was that, like, having a polytheistic set, each god is reduced a lot in power and scope from a monotheistic set right at the first swing, whereas in a duotheistic sort of, that kind of like even power balance, both beings are a lot closer to the deity concept you think of when you think of monotheism.
Right.
It's still an appreciable shift away, but I think even the shift away, it still sits closer to monotheism than I feel like it sits to polytheism. Not saying it's not appreciably different.
Right. I get where you're going.
Well, like, I think it's similarly different in concept from your normal thought of a monotheism to, like, Darma, where, like, how gods work feels appreciably different, but, like, there are some core things that make that distinct from a more polytheistic set.
I can understand where that's coming from. So, yeah.
And this is also up to personal taste for how far away things feel to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how related a concept feels is kind of subjective.
And that's true, too. So what you consider monotheistic, like, if you throw in, going back to Tolkien and how his Maiar were looked at, the men of Middle-earth, the Númenóreans, they called the Maiar in the West gods.
Right.
Like, they used that word for them. But they weren't really gods. Like, they never claimed that. They never claimed to have that deific nature to that point. So that is something you can play with in your games too. Just because someone, again, I guess this kind of goes back to what we talked about at the very start. What someone claims to be is not always what they are, or what other people call them is not always what they are. So
that actually gets into what's called inclusive monotheism, which is you believe that there is only one being and that all of the different religions are worshipping that being with a slight misunderstanding.
Right. That's very close to the Hinduism, depending on which branch you want to go with for Hinduism, but that idea.
That's why I didn't disagree with Hinduism. That's why I'm like, Hinduism is wide enough of a concept that I don't.
That's like saying Hinduism is like saying
Abrahamic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Abrahamic because that's full on Judaism. There's like 3 different major religions for that one. Maybe like saying
I know, but
Christianity.
I guess I'm not sure how wide it goes, but like there's huge divergences in what texts are considered canon and like what all there is that within Hinduism. I'd have to look into it more to say, but I was assuming that I was under the impression that it was similarly diverse as Abrahamic.
Well, you've got the 3 largest religions in the world in real life that have some form of Abrahamic religion. They all 3 have different texts that they hold to. So that's why I said Christianity would probably be the most correct, because there are so many different denominations. Right.
And I could be definitively wrong on how wide out it goes, right? That's why I'm like, fuzzy on this. I'm not particularly knowledgeable on Hinduism.
Well, I have a thought bringing back to games a little bit.
Please.
You guys are talking about that.
Sorry.
You're good.
We're getting it out there.
It could be. It's all inspiration, hopefully. It's thinking about the other thing you could do, because we're talking about a lot of kind of already having it all set in your head a bit. The other option would be it is like, as the GM, it's monotheistic, and you could even say in your players in the setting, there is this religion, and there are some other ones, but this is the main one that claims a single deity.
Mm-hmm.
But you never really give an answer on that. There's magic, and this might work more for low fantasy, probably, and then having magic be much more wizardy, witchy, where you need spell components and stuff and certain rituals. I don't think you necessarily, and the advantage to a monotheistic, now you could probably do it with poly too, but I think there's an advantage to the monotheistic in the GM headspace of just being like, yeah, there's one deity, but I won't really get into it. There's a lot of arguments, and you can let the players kind of play it out too. Some want to play an atheist or play one of the smaller religions and have battles, and the world could develop based on the character interactions and the NPCs. So I think there could be an advantage there where, as long as you have whatever system you're playing in already kind of has its rules for magic and you're just removing the deities. I think the only trouble you'd run into is like clerics and prayers and stuff, but there's not a clear interaction from the deity. It would actually give you a lot of space to kind of play with it and see what happens. And it's okay that you don't have all the answers per se, and you could kind of see as the story plays out maybe what develops.
There is another advantage with the monotheistic as well that kind of leads in with what you're talking about, is the idea of the ability to present unified lore to your players. Because polytheistic spoilers for when we get there, has an inherent kind of conflict in it.
Right.
Whereas monotheistic means that if there's one supreme being, you can usually find the equivalent of the Bible or, some spiritual writing that your characters can hold to. And for you as a GM, that means you only really have to make up one, and then you can have you can put it in a cipher or something to have it in this language or that language. And as long as you do that, it makes it feel unique to that particular culture too. So because there's dragon fonts that you can use, and then there's also Latin that you can use and stuff like that. And if you translate back and forth, you get this kind of unified message between. That's something you can have with a monotheistic that doesn't work quite as well with a polytheistic, because each of those deities is going to have something that they hold as sacred or that they say is sacred type of thing. So there's this you can't have a unified push, especially since when we realize that most of our games are played in a relatively small part of the universe and also in a relatively small part of the world. Most of the time our characters aren't going to the other continent. Most of the time the characters are staying in a singular area and affecting their area. Now you can have cross-continental stuff, but a lot of the times you don't. Most
only if you're
games.
crazy.
Yeah. So, only if you're crazy. But
Me.
so you could do that, or you can just have this unified presentation of here's this in this area, and that's all you really have to work with. You don't have to try and present this same deity in another area. Though you are better set up to, because you've already kind of laid out the way that this, you could take existing religious texts and just put them in a different font, put them in a funny fantasy font, and you could just snip bits and pieces and stick them together, and you could have something, that works for your game. And it would work. So, that's a way you could do that.
There's the point that you could have different continents have different equivalent of denominations. It's like, so in this case, we're going to go with, because we live in America, we're all most familiar with Christianity. the variances between them, while there's a lot of core aspects, you can really feel it once you get into it. So you could definitely have different regions have, like... Although, I mean, even then, denomination is too weak of a word. I don't have a good word for the difference between, like, Protestant, Catholic, Reformed, Orthodox. I want to say genre, but...
Kind of. I get where you're going. And you could have that, and even breaking that down further, if you want to, you won't even have to go to a different continent. You could just you could just leave the city, because a country church feels a lot different than a big city church.
They do.
So,
even just, like, depending on where you're at, the two different country churches can feel decently different, because it's the two different groups of the people from this region.
Yeah.
It's less common.
It's less common. But I guess that means that if you want to, you could look at... This gets kind of rough with certain histories. We kind of like to keep it not too heavy most of the time in our games.
Yeah.
So...
I'm not saying you need to have the real world reasons.
Yeah. If you try to... Unless your game's specifically designed around it, and the campaign's set that way and everybody's for it, try to avoid the whole Protestant, Catholic, back and forth kind of unkindness.
Make them sassy, not murderous.
That's a good way to put it. Make them sassy, not murderous. I need to write that down. That's the quote. So,
I mean,
humans will be humans.
They will. Well, and especially when it's the things you think are the most possibly important.
Yep.
And it's like...
for sure. On that note, too, you could, rather than having different patron saints or anything, it is these different, I'll just say, flavors on the same text, on the same being, and that's where you divide your magics as well, which could be interesting. So then there could be a little bit more friendliness there if it's like, well, yeah, we all kind of worship the same deity, but we really focus on this aspect of him. We focus on the creation aspect of him, and so we serve and worship and pray in these ways, and that grants us these abilities.
Well, and if you want to, you could go into, like, the metaphors of, like, the eyes, the hands, and you could use that sort of thing of, like, okay, we all in this area worship. So it would be more like in your average church a committee, but, like, from a broader structure, it would be like, we are the hand. We, like, keep the beasties out of towns.
Mm-hmm.
We are the heart. We make sure that there's enough food and tend to people.
That would even be, I mean, if we bring it to an even smaller scale, which can be really nice for a game, of just sticking with one place. That's how maybe the military is structured, or the whole government.
Or the whole society, and you end up playing a town where you play normal characters in fantasy worlds.
And you're all the hand?
You're all in the hand if you're in the guard. You're not called guards, you're called hands or arms.
Right.
The brazos.
Mm-hmm.
You are the brazos. Or you're really cool. Oh man, you're the brazos, which is Spanish for arm. So you're all in a hobbit town, because all my hobbits are Spanish. So you're all in a hobbit town, and you've got the brazos, the arms, but they get shortened to the brass. And then as the society goes on, their badges are made out of brass, and everybody thinks that's where it came from, but it's actually further back where it came from linguistically, brazos, for them being the arms in the agrarian society before they developed.
And I love that, by the way. I don't want to slam it. That's awesome. Also, it would be a perfect way to make a party, too. That's all you could just take any system and reflavor all the classes with those different names. You know, cleric is the hearts, or the the gentle touch, and there's wizards would maybe be the brains, or
Oh yeah,
the third eye, something like that. That could be
oh yeah,
all flavored within this town, and that's how you get the party together. And they just
yeah. Rangers are the
necessarily
legs. They take you through the wilderness.
yeah. Mm-hmm. That's I really like that.
Oh, this sounds like a really fun micro RPG.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We are at like an hour and 4 minutes on my recording, not necessarily in the actual though. We're probably like 50 minutes in the actual video.
Yeah, and we've talked about a lot of other stuff, but it was interesting.
We went on a lot of tangents, but that's because monotheistic is a little bit more difficult. So final thoughts. Just final thoughts section, Adam. Monotheistic is a little more tricky to work into a game, but if you put the effort in up front, it can be very rewarding and very useful as a GM because you can have a more unified context. Like you could just pick a specific text that you want to draw from and just take different bits out of it, and like we were talking about, put this with the hands. This is the sect of the hands, this is the sect of the eyes, this is the sect of the mouth, this is the sect of the heart type of thing. And so on and so forth, and you can let that develop out. But that's final thoughts. Worth it if you want to do it. Otherwise, there's always a pantheistic deific design for your pantheon. So that is my final thought. Any final thoughts from you guys?
Yeah. Couple things. One, I was thinking, because of all the tangent stuff, I think a general suggestion which I have for the world currently is just be chill about it too, a little bit, like, because it can get, I think we tend to go for the polytheistic maybe because of modern culture is tending to be in the monotheistic, especially Western, I should say, Western culture, we're used to that monotheist. So going to the polytheistic, you think you're in myth and everything's okay. I don't think we have to be afraid to do a monotheistic in our games, and just, like we were saying, don't get too serious about it. It's a game. We're having fun. We're telling a story.
Yeah, it's
a good way to get into deep stuff, to be like a gateway to talk about the deep stuff, but don't let it ruin your games.
Yeah, if you are somebody who believes in a monotheistic god in the real world, it is not disrespectful to then imitate that and create with that idea in your fictional games. So
yeah, we're telling stories. But then the other final thought I had was linking it with what we were saying, bringing it to that small town thing, is shout out to my friend Zechariah. He's been working on the story, and there's no real spoilers here, but he has, the setting is in a monotheistic. It ends up that it's not, it's actually in a pantheon, but within that village, within that area, it's a monotheism. So that's something else. If you're starting your campaign and you ever want to expand it, you're not necessarily restricted to that. It could be that as the village gets exposed to the wider world, they find out there's more going on. So that's something, again, that you could play with and transition into a pantheon if desired. Or you can leave it up. You don't always have to have the answers as the GM. Like, maybe it is.
You can just say the world doesn't have the answer.
Yeah,
therefore, your characters don't either. I have the answer, believe it.
Yeah, right. You don't have to tell your players. I
definitely got the answer. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm sure you guys both have this too, of like, sometimes your players say things or interact with something that you give to them, and you're like, I never thought about that. Scribble, scribble. Definitely was thinking about that.
Yeah.
So that could be a way, if you're holding it loosely, and this is probably a good general game thing, is if you're holding it loosely, okay with these other players, these other humans coming in and being creative in this world space and being okay with it morphing and changing, you never know what you're gonna get.
So what Dan's saying is you should hold on loosely, but don't let go.
Such good life advice.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, anyways, that's
final thoughts from you, Levi?
One thing that is just as like a nerd about terminology, the fancy word for believing that there are many gods, but this god is the only one I really care about, is henotheism.
Nice.
Okay. That well, a lot of your characters fall under henotheists.
Yes.
Then.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Henotheism is super duper common in this kind of a sphere. Like, it's a pan or polytheistic world, but you are personally a henotheist.
Mm.
And the next thought is that this discussion has made me more interested in the possibility, because when I thought of it, I was like, well, if I make a monotheistic god too interactive in the world, it's hard to have other things because you have the I win button. Right? But
Yep.
we have discussed a lot of interesting ways to keep that as a flavor of the setting without having it be a smashed out. Because it's like, oh, the world's about to end. Well, do we have a good monotheistic god who wants people to exist? Well, we don't have to worry about that because that's just gone.
Right. Snap.
And that leads into the idea, well, if freedom of choice is there, he doesn't present you with the idea that he's going to solve all your problems. He presents you with the idea to rise to the occasion. And so,
well, and I think part of it was this discussion of empowering the concept of like saints and angels and devils and jinn and maybe ghosts and maybe animism, while still keeping a monotheistic setting, makes it feel much more like both that the monotheism can be a useful and interesting and important part of the campaign, right? Because if they're too non-interactive, then it's like, well, why am I... It's kind of set dressing at that point.
Sure.
But if they're too interactive, there's not as much of a need for heroes. So this has helped getting me to think about where a good balancing point if I wanted to do that for a setting.
right. And that's where it comes to the idea that even in those small or great settings, God needs the brazos to do, the eyes to see. There you go. You can just make it this whole rhyme to go along with whatever small core thing that you wanted to do.
Oh, that's the equivalent of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. Right. Or like, yeah.
All right. Okay. So there's final thoughts.
Awesome.
Those final thoughts.
I mean, I have a hot take. I don't know if you want to make it a blooper or not. I hate that spell where you get a 10% chance of it answering your prayer. I think it's stupid. I kind of get what they were going for. Throw it out.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my hot take.
Okay. After Dan's hot take, no, that means that the phrase for this time, the comment for this time, to prove that you've made it this far is 10% chance.
Nice.
So
I like it.
there you go.
Yeah, you gotta really make it to...
Yeah.
As always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
All right. That. Everybody ready to start?
Yes, sir.
I believe so.
All right. Who are we? Wait. Who are we shouting out?
So, I am trying to see if this group I'm thinking of has a YouTube channel, and if I do not find that by the time I get to my shout-out section, I am shouting out a YouTuber called The Backlogs. Again, they're another bigger one, but I've been watching a decent bit of them recently, so too bad.
Yeah.
I looked for smaller ones in the similar sphere, but all of the ones in that kind of content type I've been watching recently only had a couple videos, and it had been a while.
I assume you mean the backlogs as the guy who ran through Dark Souls with just fire bombs and
a lot of things with just firebombs.
Yeah, that's kind of his deal. Okay.
He does a lot of other challenge runs. He used to do speed running.
Mm-hmm.
Firebombs is one of his currently most marketable ones that he's been doing, but he's done fists only specific weapons.
Yeah.
Stuff and things of that sort.
Yeah, his handle is Lemon. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I in part started watching him because I got into a Bloodborne kick.
Oh. I like to watch those challenge run things because I never get to play games really anymore. I don't get to do a lot of gaming. So for me, it's like, all right. I'll have to watch on someone else's time.
I would be playing his challenge run of Bloodborne while playing Bloodborne.
Nice.
That also works.
It did for me. Like, Flame Sprayer only was a surprisingly easy challenge.
I was surprised at how fast he got through how easy it was when his wife, who he got, I think they're wife now.
Yes. I believe he was saying wife.
She's the fire goddess. She's like the fire goddess now because she's, she ran through Dark Souls just using the firebomb, and it opened his eyes to how that's an easy mode to the game. You just go through the whole game throwing firebombs at people.
Well, they were playing co-op specifically. Right, so it's not just that she ran through it, but that they were like, oh, as a couple, let's play these games together. And she's like, alright, I will stay back and throw firebombs while you do the otherwise gameplay. And he's like, huh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, the problem was they were so cheap to buy compared to how many souls you got for killing. Yeah. Unintentional designs.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, before we start, Dan, what did you think of Critmas? Yeah.
Oh, we loved it. That's great. Kristen wants to record at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try to get it up.
I figured it would be easier for people to kind of think about how to sing it if somebody sang it for them rather than just reading it. So that's why I was like, I'll just go ahead and do it now.
That's great.
Play with it.
No, it was fun to actually hear it.
Yep. For context, Levi, Kristen made a version of Critmas Up, the 12 Days of Critmas.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
No, I was
very excited about it.
I could tell that it was a, Nerdmas parody song.
Yep.
That's the name of the parody album. That's the name of the future parody album that Avenue Studios does that's all Nerdmas themed.
Yes.
Nerdmas.
I mean...
Krista has a bunch. She really wants to do Enya's Only Time, but it's only dice.
Yeah.
And she's rewritten all the lyrics already.
Cool.
It's just time. Time.
Hey, we discussed this before, remember? The best time to do something, is always when you can. So.
Yep.
And you could make live stream content out of making it.
Yeah, that's
true. That's what I'm going to do with the art streams. That's one of the things about it.
Those.
It's hard to set down and dedicate time to just doing the art for the PDFs or for characters or something. But if I'm able to make content out of it while I'm doing it, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, now are y'all ready? Were you able to find that?
So it's a... I could still shout them out. They don't have a YouTube... I can't find a YouTube channel for them. But I found their website, and part of it is I just know a good couple people of this thing IRL.
Oh, that's
okay. I'll have that up then. Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
have to just shout out YouTube channels. We can shout out any kind of content we want to. So
I might shout out both them and the backlogs, because I've watched enough of the backlogs content recently that it's like, yeah, sure.
all right, you're the
I don't have
spotlighter.
to.
Okie dokie.
I like their art.
Yeah, they spend a lot of their budget on art.
That's you can tell. Love it.
Noticing that Guy Fieri dragon?
Actually, I
Hey.
was looking at the Cthulhu guy.
Oh,
the
Cthulhu
Iron
Dreamt. That's a recent.
Yeah.
I would say that's the project they are most actively working on right now.
Mhm.
In their Discord server, they actually have cryptography puzzles related to it.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, cool.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
All right, this is sounding an awful lot like a shout out. We better get into it.
Yeah, let's do this.
That's fair.
All right.